this is the 2012 Lexus CT 200H, and it's an interesting car because it has many people reviewing it on polar opposite opinions. There are some that think it's a very practical, reliable, efficient hybrid hatchback, and there are others that think it's just an overpriced Prius. So what is it? So it all starts here under the hood in the drivetrain. It uses the same 1.8 litre hybrid drivetrain that's used in the third generation Toyota Prius. And that bothers a lot of people because it's not a fast or fun or spirited drivetrain. But I think they're missing the point of this car. You see, hybrids are complicated and they have very expensive components in them. You've got the batteries, you've got the inverter, you've got the motor generators. The whole transaxle is very expensive. So if you want to get a hybrid and you want a car that's efficient and reliable, where do you look? Well, of course you look at the Prius. You see, the Prius, when it started in 2000, people were laughing at the car and they didn't think it was going to be a great success. But now the Prius drivetrain is the benchmark that all other manufacturers look at when it comes to perfecting and having the most reliable, most robust, most tried and tested, most popular drivetrain that you can get for a hybrid. And that is the purpose of having this drivetrain in this car. It means that if I need spare parts for this car, there are so many spare parts out there because the Prius is so popular. Now, like most of Lexus's cars, you can get this in an F-Sport package, and basically you just get an F-Sport grille, you get a few more other F-Sport things, you get F-Sport wheels and all that. But the problem with the F-Sport version of this car is that it gives you a firmer suspension, and as you'll see, the ride is already pretty firm. So for this kind of car, again, you're not going to throw it around the corners or anything crazy like that. So I don't know why you need to have an even firmer, sportier suspension. So I think the current suspension is fine as it is. There's actually quite a lot of thought put into the handling and aerodynamics of the CT. The front bumper and sculpted air dam, wing mirrors, spoiler, tapered cabin design, and underbody have all been designed carefully, resulting in an impressive coefficient of drag of 0.29, which improves efficiency and comfort. The driver's seating position is nice and low, and the CT is also equipped with Yamaha lateral performance dampers and a rear double wishbone suspension, and combined with a lower centre of gravity from the structure and batteries, it has improved rigidity and handling. Funnily enough though, the CT is still heavier and therefore slower than the Prius. One very subtle design feature that I actually really appreciate with Lexus cars, and that applies to this car as well, is the wing mirrors. You see, to me, I feel like you can judge the rest of a car from its wing mirrors. It's kind of like shoes when someone's dressed in a nice suit, you know. The shoes are a bit of a statement to the rest of what you're wearing, and it applies as well to wing mirrors. And they're very nice. If you look at most cars and you look at the wing mirror, you can pretty much judge the rest of the car. Is it a boring piece of plastic with a mirror stuck to the front of it or the back of it? Or is there actually some thought into the design of the wing mirror? And in this case, again, a lot of the newer cars these days, the base of the mirror is mounted from the bottom. And the more traditional look, they're mounted on the side. And from the bottom, it just kind of sticks out nicer, I think, than more traditional wing mirrors. So as we move inside the car, again, like most cars these days, you have your key fob in your pocket. And to unlock the car, you simply grasp the handle, and also the wing mirrors unfold as well, and you open the car. To lock the car, again, it's pretty similar, except you just touch the top part over here, and it will lock. Now when you get inside the cabin here, it's been well designed, everything is laid out really nice, the seat positioning is great, there's lots of leather here on the side as you can see, leather on the doors, leather on your armrest, the places where you're contacting the most, the steering wheel of course as well. It just feels very plush. The ergonomics is also really well done, you know, your hand just kind of rests here very nicely. And everything is in good reach, everything is well thought out, the dashboard layout, The HVAC controls are incredibly simple to use as well, and again, they're all very, very close to you. The switchgear in here is also really nice, and you know, it's not a Mercedes, but it still feels good. These buttons, they've got a really nice tactile response to, you know, when you press down on these, they feel a lot more premium than your standard hatchback. So this car comes standard with cloth seats, and it is pretty comfortable, but in my opinion, it does look and feel you know, quite a bit cheaper. And so in my opinion, I do think if you're going to get this car, definitely get one with a leather package. It just feels a lot softer and smoother. It looks a lot more premium than the cloth seats that you can get in this car as well. So to manipulate the infotainment, you use this control here. And there's quite a lot of negative feedback basically on the way that this is used, but I personally don't think it's that bad. It actually works quite well. People complain that people overshoot the buttons on the screen very easily, but I find it locks on pretty easily, and you can find your way through the menus pretty well. Now, again, it's a 2012 car, so it's a bit of a dated system, but you've basically got your music controls, you've got your climate controls. I don't know why they're on there when you've got everything still here. And then there's the GPS. And the GPS is pretty good, but again, you know, these days you've got your Google Maps on your cell phone or whatever, and you're probably going to use that because it's faster. You know, through here you've got to type in the address, you know, the street name, and then the city, and then you've got to search it. It just takes quite a while to get through those systems, so you're better off just using your cell phone and just mounting it somewhere in the cabin for you to use. One of the things that has not been thought out very well in this cabin is the USB and aux cable input. How are you supposed to fit something in there, and you cannot close this while something is in there? Now, in the back seats of this car, it is a compact hatchback, so it's not going to be huge, but the legroom is okay. It's not too bad. This isn't the position that I would be driving in the car, but I'm pretty short, so longer people, yeah, it's definitely going to be a bit tighter in the back here. And headroom, again, I would say is pretty average. Again, for most people it's okay for shorter trips, but if you're taller and you're going for long trips, you might find it a bit tight in the back seats here. Now, because this car does not have a rear-wheel drive system or all-wheel drive system, there is no long transmission tunnel down the centre, so at least you do, you know, someone that's sitting in the middle, it's not too bad. There is a hybrid battery cooling fan duct that is very poorly placed next to the rear right-hand passenger seat. It draws in cold air from the cabin to cool the batteries, so it's good to make sure your air conditioning is on and the cabin is fairly cool at all times. You don't want to block this vent or your kids to put their macaroni down there, because it can cause the batteries to overheat and will affect the longevity of the expensive hybrid batteries. Now, it's time to talk about a couple of disappointments in this car. You know, they're not major, but they are really simple things that you would just expect in a Lexus, and they are quite a letdown. So the first thing that this car does not have, it does not have any cup holders in the rear. None at all. There's none. Now, secondly, there's also no rear seat armrest as well in this car, so you can't put your arm down. And normally in a Lexus car, you'd put your cup holders in the end of where the centre armrest is. So there's none of that. There's also no rear seat air vents. I mean, there are vents for your feet underneath the seats, but there's none on the centre console area to face your face. And that really should be in this sort of car. There's no individual map lights on the roof. You've just got this big, fat, ugly dome light that you get in cars since the 90s. And lastly, the headliner here is just, again, it's not a very nice soft material that's usually used in a Lexus. It's this very cheap kind of material that they've used for the headliner. Now, the disappointments in this car also continue back to the front seat. And the first thing is that this steering wheel has the tilt and telescopic feature, but it is manual. I have to move this latch down and then move this in and out. And for a Lexus, that should be fully electric. And it affects two other things as well. With the memory seats in this car, in most Lexus cars, memory seats allow you to remember the memory position of the seat, but also the mirrors and the steering wheel. But because it's manual, not electric, it can't do that. And the other thing as well is that usually when you get into your Lexus and you open the door and close the door, the steering wheel will move towards you, to your position when you drive the car, and when you turn the engine off, it's going to stow the steering wheel further away to give you more room to get in and out of the car. But again, because this is manual and not electric, you don't have that feature. Also with the seats is that there is no ventilated seat option. And when you've got leather and when it's a hot day, you want ventilated seats. This car comes standard with manual seats as well, not electric seats. So a Lexus with manual seats, to me, that is just some mega cost cutting right there. And now this trim level does have electric seats, but only for the driver. So this seat here is electric and it all moves by itself, which is nice. But the passenger seat is manual. I don't know any cars that have, tried to cut costs so much that only one seat is electric and the other is manual. And lastly, the infotainment. You can get this car without the infotainment screen. And for 2012 standards, you really should, in a Lexus, have a screen. And if you don't get that option, basically there's no screen, there's no controller, there's just a little storage space here, and this radio head unit is replaced with the most ugliest 90s looking radio I have ever seen, and there is really no place for that sort of thing in a Lexus. Now let's have a look at some of the features of this car that it does have. So the first thing is that the sound system. Let's talk about that. So there are 3 different trim levels for the sound system. The first one is a bass 6-speaker system, right? And it's pretty average, right? Then you've got the 10-speaker system, right? This is the premium. This car has the 10-speaker premium sound system installed. Basically, you've got your woofers in the front doors and the back doors, and you've got 2 tweeters, a smaller tweeter, and then a mid-tweeter in the dashboard, a center channel, and a subwoofer in the boot compartment as well. The third system that you've got is the Mark Levinson's system, and I think that's a 13 speaker, or 14 speaker. And again, that is definitely going to be a lot better than this system, but because this is an entry-level luxury car, it's still not going to be, that amazing, compared to the other Lexus range sound systems that are out there. The next thing you've got is you've also got cruise control. Now, cruise control is standard. There is the option to upgrade to the radar cruise control, which this car does have fitted with it. So again, this car does have heated seats, but unfortunately does not have ventilated seats. It's also got a heated steering wheel. And with this premium package, this car does happen to have the memory seats, or memory seat I should say, just for the driver here. And it does remember the seat position and the side view mirrors, and unfortunately not the steering wheel position. As with other Lexus cars, you can also link your key fob to a memory seat position. And so if you and your partner drive the same car, you can have a memory seat position for your key and one for her or his key, and then that way when you come into the car and unlock the car, it's going to move the seat and the side view mirrors to your position or to their position. That is definitely a really handy feature with this car. This car also has a reverse camera, and there's actually 2 modes. There's the perpendicular mode, which it's in now. The little button on the bottom right hand corner, that changes it to parallel park mode. And then I basically line it up like that, and then if I keep reversing at this rate, I will end up in that spot. And there's a few other things it does as well, but basically that's the reverse function, which is quite cool. Now, as well as that, when you put the car into reverse, it also tilts down the side view mirrors. So if we put it into reverse again, you can look out here, it tilts down and back into drive again, and it tilts back up again, and that happens to both the driver and the passenger doors as well. As well as that, there's also lots of little touches in this car that are really nice. Little things like when you close and open the windows, firstly they're all automatic, so all windows are automatic in this car, but when you go to close the windows, they slow down as they approach the end. There are these nice ambient lights that also shine down from the top over here as well, near where the sunglass holder is. And when you put into sport mode, the blue light changes to a red light, and you get a nice, very subtle red light that lights up this area too. You've even got puddle lights underneath the wing mirrors, and there's also little lights in the footwells of the front passenger and driver's seat that are constantly on. So if you drop stuff down near the footwell, you can find it easily, and when you put the car into park, it lights up a bit more and you can see it more clearly. Now in the boot of the CT, it is definitely smaller than most hatchbacks, and if you remove this tray here, as you can see, I mean it's not super long. The C and D pillars are quite close to each other. It's also not very low as well. The floor is quite high, and because of that you can't store much underneath. Now you can open this, but underneath here there is some extra storage compartments underneath, but there's some very weird angles, so you can't actually fit many objects underneath the floorboard. So I mean, it's still pretty, it's decent, it's still pretty practical, and you can still fold the rear seats down and get that extra space as well, but unfortunately it's just not as big as most hatchbacks that are out there. Now to start the car up, basically you put your foot on the brake and you tap on the power button over here, and everything comes to life. So we've got this drive mode selector, which allows us to change between eco, normal and the sport mode. And the eco mode is pretty sluggish, as you would expect, and the normal mode is actually pretty good for most of your driving. And when you put it into sport mode, the gauge cluster changes a little bit. The ambient blue lighting in the gauge cluster changes to red, and instead of a hybrid meter, you get a tachometer. And sport mode actually makes quite a difference. It actually, it definitely accelerates faster, and you can feel it's a bit more responsive. The steering is more direct as well. So it is actually quite different to the normal mode. And so when you're at a stop, the engine is off if there's enough charge in the battery. And as you roll forward, it's still in battery mode, but as you push down a bit further on the accelerator pedal, then the gasoline engine kicks in. And when you're driving normally, it's using just the petrol engine. And if you are driving under 75 kilometers an hour, and you are not putting your foot down on the accelerator that much, or it's off completely, it becomes fully electric, and then a little light comes on that tells you that the engine is basically off and doing no work. And whenever you're doing that, you're using zero petrol, which is great. So when you're cruising around town and driving around in traffic, and start-stop traffic kind of situations, you do find that you can actually drive in the electric mode quite a lot. Now, once you hit the highway, it won't, if you're going over 75 k's an hour, it no longer uses the hybrid system. It's purely using the petrol engine. And because of that, it's quite funny, because unlike most gasoline cars that are more efficient when they're cruising on the highway, this car is actually more efficient around town and start-stop times in traffic. So right now I'm driving around 60 k's an hour, and I'm kind of cruising along the road, and it's purely electric right now. I'm driving at 58 or so k's an hour, and it's purely electric. Put my foot down a bit more, and the petrol engine kicks in, and you can't even really hear the difference. It's pretty seamless the way it switches between electric and petrol. So now I'm going to get to the biggest gripe I have with this car, and it's to do with the noise, not the performance, not the speed, but the noise of the engine. And it's it's not a very nice sound. And if I accelerate now, it's not a very appealing noise, is it? Now in the city, you go 50 k's an hour, and so there's not a lot of hard acceleration going on when you're driving around the city in slower areas. But when you're in the country, or particularly if you're going uphill a lot, that's when you notice it. And you really, if there's a long stretch of going up a long hill, then you're going to put up with that noise a lot more. And to me, that is the worst probably thing. If I could change one thing of this car, it would be that sound. The lowest average I've had while driving this car is 3.7 litres per 100k, which is very good. Yeah, I'd say a typical efficient car is probably between 5 and say 6.5, 7. So the fact that it's below 5 is pretty good. On average, I would say in total, we've been averaging about 4.7, 4.8 litres per 100k, which is still very, very good. Now on the highway, it's actually less efficient, so we've been getting between 5 to about 5.3, 5.4 on the highway, because you're not really using the hybrid engine on the highway. It's also an incredibly quiet car. The cabin is very, very well insulated. You can barely hear the cars outside. And obviously when the engine is turned off and you're running on pure electric power, it's just so quiet. And even little things like the fact that the air conditioning, you know, when you turn the fan speed up, it's very soft and gradual. If I turn it up now, you can hear it slowly coming to life. And then I can turn it down again, and it's not abrupt like a lot of cheaper cars where you turn the dial and it goes, it's nice and subtle. So they do some of those basics very, very well. It's just that CVT noise that really intrudes the cabin space when it's nice and quiet. But driving around town, driving around most places, suburban driving, that kind of stuff, it is definitely very nice and quiet, and you're very isolated from the outside world. The Lexus CT200H is a fantastic option for people wanting something a bit more premium than your average compact hybrid. It has incredibly good fuel economy, a very premium plush and quiet cabin, and is perfect for suburban or city driving where you are getting the most out of the hybrid drivetrain. It's still very comfortable for longer trips, but don't expect to get much spirited driving unless your music is loud enough to drown out the engine noise. You can get these cars fairly cheap in the used market, but make sure you get a higher spec one, as the lower spec ones are barely a Lexus. If you are buying a used CT, don't forget to get a hybrid specialist to check out the condition of the hybrid batteries, so you'll have a rough idea as to when they need replacing and the associated costs. Despite the tiresome engine noise at higher RPMs and the disappointing cost cutting in the interior, many people will be happy to put up with these drawbacks because they hugely value the Lexus and Toyota reliability that comes with the CT. Try and find another compact car with a premium cabin, outstanding fuel economy, and that Lexus and Toyota reliability for the same price.